You've just survived a gas attack. You're breathing, heart racing, but you're alive. Your buddy next to you, he's coughing a little, but he's okay too. You both make it back to the aid station. The medic checks you over. You're fine, he says. Lucky. You eat dinner that night. You joke with your friends. You write a letter home. You go to sleep thinking you survived. And then, 24 hours later, you wake up drowning. Your lungs are filling with fluid. You can't breathe. You're coughing up pink, frothy foam. And there's nothing anyone can do to save you. This was Phosgene, the silent killer of World War I. It killed more soldiers than any other chemical weapon in history. 85% of all WWI gas deaths. Over 85,000 men. And the worst part? You never knew you were dying until it was too late. Let me tell you about the most terrifying weapon of the First World War. Before we dive into the horror stories, we need to understand what Phosgene actually is. The chemical formula is COCl2, carbonyl dichloride. It's a gas made from carbon monoxide and chlorine. Now here's the thing about Phosgene. It wasn't invented as a weapon. It was discovered way back in 1812 by a British chemist named John Davy. For decades, it was just a laboratory curiosity, used in the dye industry to make synthetic colors, completely harmless, when properly handled in small amounts. But in 1915, when chemists on both sides started looking for better chemical weapons, Phosgene caught their attention. Why? Because it had advantages that chlorine didn't have. First, it's much less detectable. Chlorine has that obvious yellow-green color and that strong, choking smell. Phosgene, it's colorless, almost invisible. It does have a smell, but it's not alarming. Soldiers described it as smelling like freshly cut hay or moldy corn. Some even said it smelled sweet, pleasant almost. Beat darker tone. That sweetness, that was death. Second, Phosgene is much more toxic than chlorine, about 18 times more lethal, molecule for molecule. You need much less of it to kill someone. And third, this is the really insidious part. It has delayed effects. When chlorine hits you, you know immediately. Burning throat, gasping, choking. Your body screams at you to run. Phosgene, you might feel a slight irritation, maybe cough a little. But then you feel okay. You think you survived. You think you're lucky. And that's exactly when it's killing you. Let me explain what's happening inside your body when you breathe Phosgene. When Phosgene enters your lungs, it doesn't immediately cause pain. It passes through your airways and settles deep into your alveoli. Those are the tiny air sacs where oxygen enters your bloodstream. Here's where it gets ugly. Phosgene reacts with the moisture in your lungs. It hydrolyzes, breaks down into hydrochloric acid and carbon dioxide. That acid damages the walls of your alveoli. Now, your body tries to repair this damage. It sends fluid to the injured tissue, lots of fluid. This is called pulmonary edema. Within 24 to 48 hours, your lungs start filling with this fluid, sometimes up to a liter or more. You're essentially drowning from the inside on dry land. Your oxygen levels drop. Your lips turn blue. You start coughing up this pink, frothy fluid, a mix of blood plasma and air bubbles. You gasp for breath, but there's nowhere for the air to go. Your lungs are full of liquid. And here's the cruel part. Once the edema starts, there's very little doctors can do. In 1916, they had no way to drain the lungs, no mechanical ventilation, no intensive care. All they could do was make you comfortable, give you morphine, prop you up so gravity might help a little, and wait to see if your body could absorb the fluid faster than it was accumulating. Most men, they didn't. Death rates from severe Phosgene exposure ranged from 10% to 50%, depending on the concentration. Even if you survived, you might have permanent lung damage, chronic breathing problems for life. So when did Phosgene enter the war? The Germans were first, always experimenting, always looking for an edge. Phosgene was first used in December 1915, near Ypres, that same cursed ground where chlorine gas had debuted months earlier. But it wasn't pure Phosgene at first. The Germans mixed it with chlorine. This mixture had a nickname, White Star, because of the markings on the shells. Why mix them? Tactical brilliance, actually, and absolutely diabolical. The chlorine would hit first, strong smell, immediate irritation. Soldiers would immediately put on their gas masks, those who had them anyway. But gas masks in 1915 were primitive. Most were just cloth pads soaked in chemicals. They filtered chlorine, somewhat, but Phosgene molecules are smaller. They slipped right through. So soldiers would smell the chlorine, mask up, think they were protected, and breathe in the Phosgene anyway. By the time they realized something was wrong, it was already too late. The first major Phosgene attack came in February 1916 at Verdun. The Germans fired artillery shells filled with Phosgene into French positions. Thousands of shells, saturating the trenches, creating invisible clouds that lingered for hours. French soldiers, exhausted from artillery bombardment, took cover in dugouts and bunkers. The Phosgene, being heavier than air, sank down into those enclosed spaces, turned them into death traps. Men would be found dead the next morning. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle, just dead. Sometimes entire dugouts, dozen men, all dead, still in their sleeping positions. The silent killer had earned its name. The Allies couldn't ignore this. Phosgene was too effective, too deadly, and the Germans were using it more and more. By mid-1916, both Britain and France had developed their own Phosgene weapons. The chemical arms race was in full swing. The British called Phosgene shells White Star as well, copying the German designation. The French had their own variants, and they used them extensively. The Battle of the Somme in July 1916 saw massive Phosgene use by both sides. Thousands of artillery shells fired into enemy trenches before attacks, trying to kill defenders before the infantry even arrived. Gas masks improved. The British small-box respirator, introduced in 1916, was much better at filtering Phosgene. The German rubber masks also improved. But here's the problem. You had to know gas was present to put your mask on, and Phosgene was so hard to detect. Soldiers developed rituals, superstitions almost, holding up candles. If the flame flickered a certain way, maybe gas was present. Watching animals, dogs and horses would react to gas before humans could smell it. Some units kept caged birds in the trenches. Like canaries in coal mines, if the bird died, you put your mask on. But even with all these precautions, Phosgene kept killing. By 1917, Phosgene accounted for the majority of gas casualties. Not mustard gas, which gets all the attention in history books. Not chlorine, which started it all. Phosgene, the invisible killer. Let me read you an account from a British soldier, Private Edward Lynch, 16th Battalion, Lancashire Fusiliers. He survived a Phosgene attack in 1917, barely. This is from his diary. April 23rd. Jerry shelled our position all morning. Gas shells mixed with HE. Got our masks on quickly, but the smell was strange, like cut hay. Not the usual chlorine stink. We stayed masked for 2 hours. When the all clear came, I felt fine, just tired. My mate Tommy was coughing a bit, but said he was all right. We had tea that evening, playing cards. Tommy seemed right as rain. April 24th. Tommy woke me up at 0300 hours. Said he couldn't breathe properly. He was wheezing, coughing up pink stuff. By dawn, he was drowning. That's the only word for it. Drowning on land. The medics said his lungs were filling up. Nothing they could do. Tommy died at 1100 hours, 23 hours after the gas attack. He thought he was fine. We all thought he was fine. I can still hear the sound he made trying to breathe. Like water in a pipe. Rattling. Wet. That was Phosgene. And stories like Tommy's, they played out thousands of times across the Western Front. The psychological impact was devastating. You couldn't trust your own body. You could be dying right now and not know it. Every cough, every bit of tightness in your chest, was it just a cold? Or were you drowning from the inside? Some men who survived Phosgene exposure became obsessed with their breathing. Hypochondriacs, panic attacks at the slightest wheeze. And honestly, can you blame them? Let's talk numbers. Because the scale of Phosgene's lethality is staggering. By the end of World War I, approximately 1.3 million soldiers had been casualties of chemical weapons. That includes wounded and killed. Of the roughly 100,000 deaths attributed to gas, about 85% were caused by Phosgene. That's roughly 85,000 men dead from a gas that smelled like fresh hay. Why was Phosgene so much deadlier than other gases? Several reasons. 1. It was hard to detect. Soldiers didn't realize they needed protection until it was too late. 2. It was more toxic than chlorine by a factor of 18. Smaller concentrations could kill. 3. It was persistent. Phosgene could linger in trenches, dugouts, and shell craters for hours, continuing to expose soldiers long after the initial attack. And 4. The delayed effects meant soldiers didn't seek treatment immediately. By the time symptoms appeared, the damage was often irreversible. Both sides produced Phosgene in industrial quantities. The French alone manufactured over 15,000 tons of Phosgene during the war. The Germans even more. The British ramped up production throughout 1916 and 1917. Artillery shells, mortar rounds, gas projectors. Every delivery method was adapted to carry Phosgene. It became the weapon of choice for chemical warfare. Not because it was more gruesome than mustard gas, but because it was more efficient, more reliable, more deadly. In the grim calculus of war, Phosgene won the equation. So how did doctors try to treat Phosgene exposure? The honest answer? They struggled. When Phosgene casualties started arriving at field hospitals in 1916, doctors had almost no idea what to do. They'd never seen anything like it. A soldier would walk in, saying he'd been gassed but felt okay. The doctor would examine him. Lungs sounded clear. Breathing was normal. Send him back to rest. 12 hours later, that same soldier would be on a stretcher, drowning in his own fluids. Medical officers quickly learned to be more cautious. Anyone exposed to gas, even if they felt fine, was kept under observation for at least 48 hours. But observation didn't mean they could do much to help. Treatment options were limited, painfully limited. They'd keep the patient propped up, sitting or semi-sitting. Gravity might help drain fluid from the lungs. Maybe they'd administer oxygen, if they had it. Most field stations didn't in the early years. They'd give morphine for the pain and terror, sometimes atropine to try to dry out secretions. But these were just comfort measures. Some doctors tried bloodletting, draining blood to reduce pressure. It didn't work. Some tried stimulants to keep the heart strong. That didn't work either. The truth is, once severe pulmonary edema set in, there was very little 1916 medicine could do. Either your body would absorb the fluid and you'd survive, or it wouldn't, and you'd drown. It was terrifying for the medical staff. Imagine being a doctor and watching men die slowly over 24 to 48 hours, and you can't do anything meaningful to help them. Many doctors and nurses who worked in gas casualty wards during World War I developed what we'd now call PTSD. The sounds, the wet, rattling breathing, the pink foam, the desperate gasping. It haunted them for years. Some medical advances did come from this horror. Better understanding of pulmonary edema, improved treatment protocols, the foundations of modern respiratory medicine. But those advances came at a terrible cost. The only real defense against Phosgene was the gas mask, and the race to build better masks drove incredible innovation in a very short time. When gas warfare started in 1915, soldiers had almost nothing. Cloth pads, handkerchiefs soaked in urine, goggles. These did basically nothing against Phosgene. By late 1915, both sides had developed better masks. The British hypo helmet was a flannel bag soaked in chemicals that you pulled over your head. It looked ridiculous. It was hot and uncomfortable, but it worked, sort of. The problem was the filter. Early masks used chemicals to neutralize chlorine, but Phosgene molecules were smaller. They needed activated charcoal filters to physically trap the gas molecules. The breakthrough came in early 1916 with the British small box respirator. This was a rubberized face mask connected to a box filter worn on the chest. The filter contained layers of activated charcoal and chemicals. It worked. Not perfectly, but well enough. If you got your mask on in time, and if the seal was good, you'd survive. The Germans developed their own version, the Gummi mask. Similar design. Rubber facepiece, external filter canister. The French developed the M2 mask. Americans, when they entered the war in 1917, used modified British designs. But here's the thing about gas masks. They only work if you wear them, and soldiers hated wearing them. They were hot, claustrophobic. They restricted your vision. They made it hard to communicate. The filters made breathing feel labored. Your face would sweat. The rubber would chafe. Soldiers had to drill constantly. Gas alarm drills. You'd have to get your mask on in under 6 seconds. 6 seconds from alarm to full protection. Sounds easy, right? Now imagine doing it in a muddy trench, under artillery fire, in the dark, with shaking hands, while shells are exploding around you. Many casualties happened because soldiers didn't get their masks on fast enough, or the mask wasn't fitted properly, or it had been damaged and they didn't know. One small tear in the rubber, one broken seal, that's all it took, and Phosgene would slip through. So what happened to Phosgene after World War I? You might think that after the horrors of gas warfare, the world would ban these weapons and destroy the stockpiles. You'd be wrong. The 1925 Geneva Protocol banned the